You're listening to Voices of Harvest, a podcast bonus series from Casually Baked, celebrating the craft of cannabis farming and the art of storytelling.
So are y'all on a pretty big road trip right now?
Yeah, we're on a road trip because one of the things we do is we like to go to the dispensaries where we have an account and do an in-store meet and greet.
Yeah, totally.
And therefore we meet some of the local people, but also we meet the bud tenders and the owners and so on. And it's really nice to talk to the bud tenders and, tell them what's special about our product and how we grow and so on. And just, be on a first name basis with them, because in the end, actually, it's the bud tenders who sell your product.
Absolutely.
Right? And so, we bring it, in some cases, we bring them up to our ranch and show them how the plants are growing and so on. And, just have a day at the ranch. It's really nice.
Well, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, this Voices of Harvest. It's so important for people to get a feel for what harvest really is like and what these farmers go through.
Yeah. Well, it's a very special time of year. Now, in the old days, it used to be the level of paranoia would just go way, way up at this time of year. And for two reasons. One, of course, the sheriff or whatever was always looking out, and camp it was. But in addition, there were also marijuana rustlers in those days who would come in and just clip the tops off your pants. Your plant, not your pants, your plants.
I mean, in the end, it really is. They took your pants.
Right, that's true. And so, they wouldn't take the whole plant necessarily, but just take the top best ones, right? So that's not happening so much anymore. And now it's just the anticipation is the crop as good as it's going to be. And then there's always the tension about what is the actual best moment to pick the plants, right?
Yeah.
And every grower has their own special way, their technique, and so on about how to do it. And over the years, I've kind of developed my own way of doing it, which is basically, all year long, you really have to pay attention to the plant, right?
Yeah.
And you can talk to the plant, but it's just as important, maybe more, to listen to the plant. Because if you listen, she'll give you information, right? And as you're doing that, then you get more and more in tune with the plant, especially if you started from seed. Then you're really connected, right? So when it's time for harvest, what I do... You still going? Oh, let's get rid of this. At harvest time, what I do, I know they're about ready. And say I got 100 plants, I really don't care which one comes in tomorrow or which 5. So I go up and I talk to each plant, and I say to the plant, and I say, I sort of very gently touch it, and I say, are you ready to come in tomorrow? Right?
Yeah.
And then I say, do you want to come in tomorrow, right? I'm really talking to her, right? And then I say a final thing. I say, should I leave you for another few days? So if I ask the first question, are you ready to come in, and I get a strong signal, that's a yes.
Here, put that close.
And then I give another one, and I say, are you ready to come in? Do you want to come in? Again, another strong signal, yes. And I say, if I leave you another few days and I get a weak signal, that means that one's coming in tomorrow.
Okay.
And I go around to every single plant, and I ask it every day, do you want to come in tomorrow morning?
And when this plant is speaking to you, where do you feel that?
Well, I feel it. See, it's like what they call muscle testing or kinesiology. If I pull and it's so strong I can't break the connection, that's a yes. And if I try and hold it,
talking to the mic.
If I try and hold it as hard as I can, and I just can't hold it, I'm really squeezing as hard as I can, but the negative won't let me hold it. It's really amazing.
Okay.
And so the plant really communicates with my kind of inner physical self.
Yes. And I have had that done at an acupuncturist's office.
Acupuncturists and chiropractors do it, right? And they use it as a diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
And I had several chiropractors who kind of taught, and acupuncturists who taught me how to do it. So I just figured we have this symbiotic relation with cannabis.
Yeah.
So deep. We have it in our sides ourselves. I eat hemp seeds and so on. We're just totally involved. And so if I just say, okay, I'm empty, tell me.
Yes.
Then the plant will really speak.
Swami, I always love seeing you. You tell such good stories.
Yeah. So then when we harvest, what we do is we harvest in the dark. Okay. We get everybody up at like 5 o'clock, and that's not always such an easy thing, right? And so we get up at 5 o'clock, everyone puts on their headlamp, and then we go out in the garden, and we already know which ones we're going to take, right? And so when we do that, then we just cut those plants down, take them in and hang them up, and then we just hang them up outside the barn. And then after they're all hung up and everything's okay, then we go have pancakes for breakfast.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things. I make everybody pancakes. And, of course, if they don't want pancakes, I'll make them an omelet, too. But
You're a good man.
And then after that, then we go out and then we take the plants and we put them in the barn. We hang them up in the barn. And then they'll sit there for a couple weeks until they're dry. So anyway, so that's the thing. And we'll do like a batch. We'll do 3 days in a row and we'll harvest, and then the barn will be full. And then we have to wait another, say, 10 days to 2 weeks to take everything down. Then we do another harvest.
Yeah.
So we spread them out that way.
Now, one of the things that I appreciated talking with you about before was this idea that, that cannabis can age and refine just like wine can.
Yeah.
So when you're saving and a bunch of extra cannabis, like what is the storage mechanism that you use to keep it pristine?
We call it, we think there's 3 phases. There's the drying, and then there's the curing, and then finally there's the aging. And aging is the process that happens once it's in. We always put them in jars, right?
Okay.
At that point. And when it's in the jar, then the aging goes on like the aging for wine. And it's even like tobacco too, that from tobacco, when they harvest tobacco, it's 3 years from the time they harvest until the time they actually make a cigarette, because they dry it and they cure it and they age it and they ferment it and they toast it and they do all these things. So we really feel that that cannabis is really starts to be at its best at about 6 months after harvest, and then it's good for probably at least another year and a half if you store it properly. And one of the things about our Swami Select is that we use these very special jars that come from Holland, and they're called Miron glass. And I think you've seen them. They're kind of ultraviolet purple when you look through them. So what that does is it helps age and preserve the plant, because the ultraviolet light doesn't allow any bacteria to form, right? And so in the jar, the cannabis is actually getting better.
All right.
And if I can talk a little more about it,
totally.
The other thing that happens when you have aging cannabis is that several things happen that we know about. There are probably other things we don't know about. But number one, the terpenes, which are on the living plant, they're what are known as monoterpenes. They're much simpler molecular structure. But when they get harvested over time, they turn into sometimes what are known as sesquiterpenes or 6 terpenes or polyterpenes. And so something that starts out as one then becomes many, and so it's also going to have a different medical effect or psychological effect, and it probably is even going to smell different. All right?
Yeah.
So that's when you have the terpenes age and they change, right? And then the other thing that happens is they say that CBN increases. And CBN is supposedly one of those sedative, relaxing kind of things, right? And then the final thing that we know about so far is that chlorophyll changes, right? Chlorophyll breaks down and gets oxidizes and so on, so it's not quite the same thing.
Well, and is chlorophyll the part that makes that bitter taste out of?
Well, actually, the bitter taste, it would be hard to say. But I would say in many cases the bitter taste can well be from the fact that they didn't flush out the nitrogen or phosphorus, which are nutrients, and they tried to feed the nutrients too late in the cycle. But see, we use only compost teas, so all our amendments are put in the beginning of the season, and during the season we use compost tea, so you really don't need to flush it out.
So what are those effects that the chlorophyll has?
Well, I'm not really sure what the it might be that cellulose, that kind of leafy, grassy taste flavor, right? But once the chlorophyll changes, then it doesn't do it doesn't fluoresce. So that's how, I was just talking to some people who are growing Panama Red, and if you ever had any Panama Red, it was really dark red. It was almost this color red, right? But that was part of its aging process, right? Because in the old days, we never got green flower. Because by the time it got here from Thailand or Mexico or Colombia or something like that, it was already 6 or 7 months old.
Yeah, well, and I have a grower friend in Canada who was doing some experimentation of letting the flower cure in the sun and letting all of that chlorophyll go. So it looked more of this hayish color.
I wonder how it turned out. I would be really reluctant because putting it in the sun does so many other things.
Well, and I don't know if that's exact. I mean, I don't know his exact process. But when I got it back
Did it
from
taste
it,
good?
it had a nice texture. It kind of almost. The texture almost seemed like tobacco that you would smoke out of a pipe.
Okay.
And I
see.
actually thought that might be a great way to get that market to to interact with cannabis, because it seemed like that would be a great pipe to
people
smoke it
are
out
actually
of.
smoking a lot of blunts now with tobacco wrappers and so on. So
But
that's a different
us
kind of
hood
thing.
rats have been doing that for a long time.
Right. But
but it seems like just a more connoisseur-ish way to consume, which, there's that other market that just needs an excuse to feel good about smoking.
Right, that's true. Well, we do always hope to appeal to the top-end market that wants the finest flower. And one of the things that's going to be concerning people more and more as they realize is purity, I think, is really going to be an issue for a lot of people, right? Now we know with vape pens that's a really crucial issue, but with flowers also, you want to know that there's no pesticides and no pathogens on there and so on. So that's why, the testing is a very, very good thing for protecting the consumer, right?
Absolutely.
And, so that's why we use only the purest ingredients, and we're totally organic, and we're certified that way, even though we can't use that word.
Right.
Right. We have a program called Clean Green.
I'll see you inside when you're done.
Okay. We're part of the Clean Green certified program, and the guy who founded that, Chris Van Hook, he actually works for the Department the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and he actually is an attorney for them. So his program is equally, if not stricter, than the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So when we get his certification, then we know, and we've been since 2011.
Yeah.
And so that's going to tell the consumer, hey, you can depend on this.
That's right. That tells a really good story.
Pure.
Yeah, and I think you're being
go
called
now.
somewhere else. Yes,
Okay.
you got to go. But thank you. It's
Thank you
always
so
a pleasure to see you.